My name is John Welch, and I'm an associate professor in the Department of Archaeology and also jointly appointed in the School of Resource and Environmental Management here at Simon Fraser University. I have a couple of different projects going, some north of the border in the sort of Simon Fraser University hinterland, working still with the Stolo Research and Resource Management Center up in Chilliwack, BC, up the Fraser Valley, on a couple of different projects, including a recent exciting initiative that's connected up with IPinCH, but not an IPinCH project per se, to create a virtual museum linked to a specific heritage site, the Skowlitz site, working closely with the Skowlitz community. People know about that. And I guess that's the big new initiative north of the border. There's still some other work perking along with the Katzie First Nation community and also with the Tla'amin Nation up the coast here. South of the border, I work in a couple of different venues, always and kind of forever with the White Mountain Apache Tribe, associated with the redevelopment of the Fort Apache historic site and the creation of opportunities for the tribe and its members, and economic development and self-representation associated with historical developments that occurred at and through that site. We're working, and have been now for 20 years, in order to make that place, Fort Apache, into a place of pride and, I guess, hope, because it's a place that was previously associated with subjugation, colonialism, and lots of other bad stuff. And then we have another project going on right now, also working between the Jemez Pueblo, White Mountain Apache, Hopi, and Zuni, all working together to identify ways that people used to live successfully in forested parts of the American Southwest. It's a really fast changing part of the world because of climate change, and so the forest systems are very unstable there, and they're burning up quickly. And so it hasn't always been that way, and so we're interested in hearing from Native people about how they established sustainable and resilient relationships and ecosystems in forested settings. And so those are probably the big current fieldwork projects, and take me away from beautiful British Columbia. I mean, it's to my way of thinking a matter of historical fact that the process of colonization, the process of colonization for the White Mountain Apache Tribe has involved successive commoditization of everything that they once had. Their land, their labor, their knowledge, their artistic and cultural activities. All of these things have slowly but surely been turned into things to be bought or sold. And those markets have been taken away from Apache control, to the point now that they're left with really, really very little. Like, the land has been degraded from overharvesting of trees, from use by miners, from reduction in the size of the land, just basic quantitative reduction in the size of the land that they once controlled. So Apache people are understandably hesitant about continuing to share information or provide free access to people about that. And so one of the many activities that we engaged in when I was working for the tribe was to identify the places, things, knowledge that required special attention, and to place those effectively off limits without special permission from the tribe and the tribe's elders to outsiders. And so that has, I think, given the tribe a sense of greater control over its environment and helped them understand the great value associated with their history, their culture, and their lands, and made it so that if, unlike what the case was in the past, if people now want to use an archaeological site, a photograph of an older Apache person, a video of a ceremony ongoing, they have to ask permission, and they have to provide consideration and show that it's going to have some benefit to the tribe and its members, or the answer is usually no. Like, the tribe, I think, has a reasonable argument that it's given plenty. Native people in the United States don't necessarily put it in terms of intellectual property and cultural heritage, but the questions are the same. These questions associated with who is going to have access to, use of, and benefit from cultural heritage. I think it's probably not an exaggeration to say that every indigenous group has a way of talking about these issues because so much has changed in terms of their level of control over those kinds of questions. And I think it's safe to say that every indigenous group has interest both in regaining greater sovereignty and control over intellectual property and cultural heritage, and also in finding better ways of representing that cultural heritage authentically and on their own terms so that others are not representing their history and culture for them, because that also is a form of harm and has caused people to feel like their culture is not their culture. And without that sense of control and that sense of linkage to authentic identity, then you have other problems that show up in communities. You know, IPinCH is a big, complicated project, and we set it up specifically so it could be something for anybody that wanted to participate in it and get involved in it. And I think that that's worked out pretty well. And so what I tell people is that IPinCH is a bundle of opportunities to get involved, to identify the cultural heritage that is important to you or the people that you work with, and to understand that cultural heritage in terms of the intellectual property that's embedded in that cultural heritage, and to then find ways to protect, carry forward, share, whatever is the community or intellectual interest that you have in that intellectual property embedded in cultural heritage. I divide heritage in my way of thinking about things, into two parts. There's biophysical heritage, sometimes called, environmental heritage or natural heritage. And that is all the other life that's around us, non-human life, as well as lands, oceans, all elements of the physical world that are there. And then, of course, there's sociocultural heritage, or just cultural heritage. And that is stuff, both tangible and material, and intangible and spiritual, that comes from our forebears, parents, grandparents, generations before us, that is connected up with group identity, and that we have bought into, at least in part, as being part of our identity. So heritage and cultural heritage, you put those things together, and you come up with the things that identify us as groups that individuals have to buy into to be part of those groups. Intellectual property, you get the classic definition of it's any sort of creative expression of the mind. I think, again, it's a term that helps to get a little bit more up close and personal with, and to understand that we all are creators of intellectual property. It doesn't mean that everybody is making completely unique thoughts all the time, but we're all using our unique sensory apparatus, our eyes and ears, and ways of feeling and interacting in social environments in order to come up with solutions to problems. In a lot of ways, they can be technical, and so there's practical intellectual property, like a recipe for making a cake. It can be historical knowledge associated with what happened. How did things get to be the way they are? It can be artistic, like how do we make things beautiful? How do we solve that problem of wanting to live in beauty and having sensory harmony? It's something that humans desire and has value to us because of that. And then there's like social intellectual property, like who do we talk to? How do we know how to interact with people? How do we get through the world? All these different types of intellectual property are uniquely constituted by individuals, and we're constantly coming up with solutions to all these different kinds of problems. When other people identify it as being valuable, then it becomes more interesting. And then things get to be a place where sometimes they have market value, sometimes they have value but not necessarily on a market level. And but it's I think the better way of understanding intellectual property is to bring it down to that kind of a personal feel, and to understand it as being something that can be just personal, or it can go out and expand across social geographical spaces. The community-based initiatives was to create one set-aside bundle of opportunities where IPinCH would directly support something that was of specific interest linked to intellectual property and cultural heritage to a specific community, and launch a nice series of community-based initiatives, which I think are really the stars in a lot of ways of the IPinCH universe. They're the bright suns that illuminate kind of the rest of what's going on inside of the project. Yeah, so if those community-based initiatives are the stars, the suns in the various planetary systems, the working groups are sort of the laws of the universe, the themes that cut across all the different planetary systems. And so these working groups are, hopefully, by looking at things like commodification, by looking at things like ethics, by looking at issues associated with communities and community-based research activities. These working groups are going out and identifying things in the IPinCH universe that are important, and bringing those into the project and analyzing those in distinctive and important ways. And that is taking shape through the composition of separate mini research communities. The knowledge base is the other sort of key three legs of the IPinCH platform. If you've got the community-based initiatives and the working groups here, knowledge base is this other pillar that supports all of this bundle of opportunities with access to information. It is a digitized storehouse of documents, of links, and increasingly of the products that have come out of IPinCH itself. So it's a repository of information that's related to cultural heritage and intellectual property embedded in cultural heritage. So the idea, again, going back to my commitment to making sure that there was community benefits coming out of the project, was to reach out into the project team and try to attract partners and people interested in coming up with practical tools that communities and researchers, whether or not they're researchers from the communities or just research that are affiliated with the communities, creating tools that can be used by them in order to be more effective in their research activities, and or in the protection and conservation of cultural heritage and intellectual property that's embedded in that cultural heritage. And so right now we are still kind of scoping out and identifying all the assets that exist, both in terms of the team members and the published literature and kind of gray literature that's out there, pamphlets and workbooks and agreement documents, things that people have done in the past in order to create better research that has reciprocal benefits for community and non-community based researchers, and bring those into the project knowledge base, and then sort those resources inside the knowledge base and start to categorize them and partition them out so that we can spin them into these individual tools. And so by reaching out across national borders, by reaching out across disciplinary borders, using these two keywords of intellectual property and cultural heritage in order to try to get people talking across the boundaries of anthropology and law and archaeology and community-based research, First Nation studies, these kinds of things that previously kept us apart from talking. We've been successful in bringing people together to have conversations that they wouldn't be having otherwise. And it's also a way of shedding light on the complexity of this puzzle that there's multi-dimensions to it. It's not just a jigsaw puzzle laid out flat. It's got temporal dimensions to it. It's got cultural dimensions to it. And that adds levels of difficulty for communicating about these things that can only be solved by getting people together and getting them focused on commonality.